Our eyes were blinded to it. We were so occupied with COVID. I really feel like the bigger issue here all along was the mega jail. Our restaurant opened in 1987. We managed to be really lucky enough to come out of COVID and still have our business running. And then immediately after COVID, it feels like a huge slap in the face.
In Manhattan's Chinatown, history is repeating itself, and time is running out. New York City is planning to build a new jail in Chinatown, a jail that will become one of the tallest in the United States. On March 20th, hundreds marched, evoking memories of protests decades ago.
No new jail! No new jail! No. When Mayor Koch in the 1980s saw 12,000 people from this community marching in the same streets, in the same route that we're gonna take, he said, I don't care. You don't vote, you don't care, you don't matter. Now we're here. We cannot repeat that history. We are here, we are not invisible, and we're saying no new jails. No new jails.
When preparing for this rally, I was most struck by the images from the protests in 1982 with the signs, invest in housing, not jails. Why is it that 3 decades later, this conversation is still happening? 3 decades ago, our elders were still fighting to stop the disinvestment of people. This cannot happen, and Mayor Adams has an opportunity to stop this jail. Stop the jail!
Carlin Chan was one of the thousands of Chinatown residents who attended protests and rallies during the 1980s. The experience shaped his views of politics and activism in New York City.
During 1980, when we had the demonstrations here, the whole community turned out with thousands of people. And the thing is, it went forward anyway. We were disappointed at the time. And this time around, it's the same. It's like, you know, the elected, they're not listening to the community.
So often people say that Asian Americans are silent, that they let this happen. Yet you've seen so many protests here in the past. What does that say?
This is a community that's being ignored. Like, our community puts in millions of dollars in taxes, but we're not getting equitable return. We're always getting stepped on.
So why do they do that?
They do that because they think they can get away with it all the time. They have gotten away with it, and they're just pushing these services into community, you know, in the communities of color. They're just validating us during all these scoping hearings. But honestly, are they really going to listen?
The jail Carlin protested against in the 80s is now being demolished, set to be replaced by a newer, larger jail, part of the borough-based jail program. A program started by former Mayor Bill de Blasio to close the infamous jail at Rikers Island. The city initially designed a 45-story, 450-foot tall jail in Chinatown that would dwarf the neighboring community. The jail would be built on the site of the current jail, built in the 1980s, the Manhattan Detention Complex, otherwise known as the Tombs. After heavy criticism, in 2019, the city negotiated with then City Council member Margaret Chin to limit the jail to 295 feet tall and 29 floors, 5 floors taller than the current facility. The city committed to add a community or commercial space to the jail and $50 million towards community organizations and projects, including $35 million for the Museum of Chinese in America. Many Chinatown residents and organizers disapproved of the plan, and newly elected Mayor Eric Adams criticized building a new jail in Chinatown during his campaign. But demolition of the old Manhattan Detention Complex began anyway in February. The city hasn't released designs for the 295-foot version of the new jail. It's led to distrust of the city, not only by Chinatown residents, but residents in Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx, where other borough-based jails are planned. It has led to criticism about the project and questions as to why these locations were selected.
The process in which this project was pushed through, the process, it was discriminatory,
Yes.
it was predatory,
Yes.
and it is a form of violence, and I reject that. When Mayor Adams campaigned here, standing side by side with so many of you, he called this jail institutionalized hate. Institutionalized hate against the Chinatown community that has already suffered so much. Mr. Mayor, now that you are our mayor, now that you are the institution, do you still stand with the community of Chinatown? Do you still stand with us?
Our lives and our community is just as important as the wealthiest community that's for this plan. A coalition of us from Queens, Brooklyn, and of course from my borough, the Bronx, have been working together in solidarity to oppose the city's plan for these borough-based jails. And we, from the onset, knew what it meant. This isn't over. Don't believe anybody that says this is a done deal.
That's right.
It's not done.
This is just not one march of one type of people. We have people from all nationalities. We have people from all boroughs, from the South Bronx to Queens to Brooklyn, all here today in a unified voice.
Yeah!
We don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. We don't need a new jail. We need investment in communities, especially communities of colors, especially in low-income communities.
A fear amongst many Chinatown residents is the environmental and economic impact of the jail. Construction may last until 2027, and a study by New York University stated concerns that long-term demolition and construction of a new jail would harm Chinatown's elderly population, exacerbating chronic disease. Local businesses and community organizers worry about the impact construction will have on tourism and foot traffic. The city promised to mitigate these concerns, but Victoria Lee, co-founder of Welcome to Chinatown, is still worried.
There's asbestos concerns for the demolition of the current Manhattan Detention Center. It can impact the air quality. We're right next to a senior center. We're in Columbus Park. There are also preschools in the area. So there's the health implications of that. And then further, I mean, looking back into this is real disinvestment into the community. And the resources that the city is planning to go into the mega jail, we should not only have these resources once someone is in jail or is in prison. Instead, we should look at how we actually have resources to prevent this from happening in the first place.
So you spent the past 2 years organizing during COVID to try to keep many of these businesses alive. Now you run into this problem with the jail, and it's threatening all of that. How do you respond to that?
It shows about the vulnerability of low-income immigrant communities that are primarily made up of people of color, and that there's just a lack of resources and true investment back into the people and the residents here. So it is disheartening to see that, especially for a community like Chinatown, where it just feels like it's one after another, constant problems.
And this isn't the first time people have rallied or protested against this jail. And every single time they haven't been heard. What makes you think this is going to be different?
It's a continued fight, and that Mayor Adams, he ran on a campaign promise of saying that he did not support the jail. So we're hopeful that he doesn't want this to be his legacy. Being able to, I think, mobilize all the people that we had today shows how much that the community just doesn't want this.
One of the businesses Victoria and Welcome to Chinatown worked with during the pandemic is Pastor Grill and Noodles, located directly across the street from the Manhattan Detention Complex. Tony Chung, a graduate biomedical student by day, spent his remaining hours desperately trying to keep his family restaurant alive.
I mean, it was definitely tough. Of course, I had a sort of sense of duty to help my family out with whatever they need, especially since they put in so much time and effort to bring me to where I am today. You know, I would study and go to the lab during the weekdays, and then during the weekend where, you know, we would see a little bit more business, I would come out and help my dad on Saturdays and Sundays, usually for the whole day from 10 to 10, basically. I really do see the restaurant as part of my family's legacy and history. A lot of our menu items are created from recipes that have been passed down for generations. And so, of course, we have a lot of pride in what we do. You know, my mom, she's the chef of this restaurant. My dad's the manager. When I was growing up, my parents, they didn't hire any babysitters. My sister and I would stay at the restaurant and we would do our homework. And so I have a really close personal connection to the restaurant. I see it as my second home. And you know, when I saw what was happening to the business and to Chinatown, you know, I made a promise to myself that I would do everything in my power to help my family. 2019, 2020, most businesses were concerned with COVID. Like, how do we keep our doors open? The issue of the mega jail didn't really come into our radar until this year, when the government started to make plans to demolish the jail and build an even bigger mega jail. They plan on cutting off the sidewalk around the jail. You know, that means at least half of the foot traffic coming to businesses like ours. And not to mention, you know, the noise and air pollution. You know, who would want to come to a restaurant to eat like ours? Why would they want to breathe in the dust and hear all the loud construction noises? The jail will become a marker of the Chinatown community, and it will overshadow the role that all these small businesses with such rich immigrant stories will have. You know, I can see how the jail will essentially dilute the rich cultural and historical element of Chinatown.